Welcome back, Tim Thiessen Live. My next guest is Dr. John Eastman from Chapman University and the Center for Constitutional Jurisprudence. Dr. Eastman, we got you?
Tim, how are you? Thanks for having me on your program.
Our connection here. So, okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Dr. Eastman, we have you?
Yes, you have me. I can hear you fine.
Okay, we have a little technical here. Is you and I are out of the same age bracket, John, and so technology I'm still fumbling around with from time to time. So anyway, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm here. Have you got me on yet?
Yeah, you're live and you're being broadcast worldwide right now. So anyway, the Supreme Court just finished their current section, sir, and there's a couple of cases when I was talking to you that were really in the forefront of your mind. So go ahead and start where you'd like to.
Well, I mean, one of the things that everybody's looking at is kind of like reading the old photos from the Politburo to see who's standing next to who. What kind of tea leaves can we read from this court's term? Because there are a couple of very big cases coming down the pike. The challenge to the National Health Care Bill, or Obamacare, is one of them. And the challenge to the Arizona immigration statutes is the other. And so one of the things I found most fascinating is trying to see from these courts' decisions what we might portend for those cases. And there's a very important federalism case called Bond versus United States that I think is a strong indication that Justice Kennedy, at least, is keeping in mind the notion that the states are separate sovereign entities and that all the powers in this country are not given to the national government. Bond involved a lady named Carol Bond who was very excited when she found out her best girlfriend was going to have a baby, until she discovered that the baby was fathered by her own husband. She stole some chemicals from her workplace and put it on her former best friend's door handle and car door handle. She got a little bit of a chemical burn. And instead of being prosecuted by the state officials, as would normally happen there for assault and battery, she was prosecuted by federal officials for violating the International Chemical Weapons Ban Treaty and the implementing statute. She challenged the constitutionality of that. The lower court said she didn't even have the legal standing to bring such a challenge, that only the states could do so. The Supreme Court unanimously reversed. And what's significant, though, is the opinion was written by Justice Kennedy, and he reminded everybody pretty clearly that ours is a system of federal power and state powers, and that the federal government only gets to exercise those powers that are delegated to it in the national constitution, and that anybody that runs afoul of an unconstitutional statute gets to be able to raise that challenge in court. And so the reminder that some of the main powers that we deal with every day, such as the police power at issue with Mrs. Bond, or the health care powers that are often reserved to the states, I think is a powerful indication that Justice Kennedy may already be looking to hold the health care bill unconstitutional.
It sounds to me like this Bond versus United States is laying the framework, I think, to start dealing with these healthcare issues, because the landscape, sir, is just absolutely littered with inconsistencies right now in this thing.
I think that's right. And there was a decision out of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals today up in Michigan that upheld the healthcare bill. So we've got several courts going different directions. Ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to decide it, and everybody anticipates that Justice Kennedy is the swing vote. Now, there's another case, Chamber of Commerce versus Whiting, that involved an Arizona immigration statute, not the one that got so much publicity the last year, but a prior one that told employers, if you knowingly hire illegal immigrants, we're going to revoke your business license. And the same type of preemption arguments that federal law governed all things immigration were made in that case by the Chamber of Commerce. And the Supreme Court said, no, there's a preemption provision in the federal immigration laws. It says that states can't add criminal or civil penalties, but it specifically allowed states to use their licensing authority, which is what Arizona did. The notion that states get to do what they want to protect their citizens as long as the federal law doesn't expressly preempt it or trump it, I think is a very significant indication that the Arizona SB 1070 immigration law, which does a lot more than just deal with the employer-employee relationship, is also perfectly constitutional.
Speaking of immigration, we've got our issues in Arizona. California, we're just covered up right now with people. This thing is so divisive. This is one of those kind of like the redevelopment issue. It's dividing conservatives. It's dividing the liberals. It's just dividing everyone. The federal government has a duty to protect our borders and take care of immigration. But if they're not doing that, where does that leave the states? I know Arizona is trying, but when they do, then the same government that won't enforce or help the states turns around and sues them. So where do you think this is going to go in this whole debate here, like in California?
Well, I think ultimately the Supreme Court is going to recognize that the states have an independent obligation to provide safety and security to the citizens of their state. And when the federal government won't do so, the states have perfectly legitimate authority to take steps on their own. Now, they can't set different immigration policy. They couldn't say somebody that the federal government has allowed into this country can't be allowed into a particular state. But that's not what the Arizona statute is doing. It was simply allowing its state officials to help with the enforcement of federal immigration law. And I think the Supreme Court of the United States is going to say that's perfectly acceptable. In fact, the federal government ought to welcome that kind of assistance from the states. Because if they don't have enough resources to control our borders, well, if the states are willing to offer their resources as well, so much the better.
Well, on my previous guest here, Supervisor Worthley from Tulare County, 50% of Tulare County here is BLM land or national forest. And with the pot growing that's going on in our parks and BLM ground, but yet the government wants us to clean it up here as the citizens of Tulare County, but they don't want to participate with manpower or money to do it. And
it's one of the reasons why the Constitution allows the federal government to have only certain federal lands. The District of Columbia for the nation's capital, but also dockyards and forts to assist with our military effort. This idea that the federal government could take half of a state and make it a federal park or a federal forest and not state lands is a relatively new development. And I think at some point the federal government is going to so overreach on that the states are collectively going to come back together and say, wait a minute, what are you doing? Where's the constitutional authority for engaging in that kind of conduct?
Well, the last grab, and specifically it encompassed a large portion of Tulare County and a portion of Fresno County, was President Clinton, and he pretty well shut down the logging industry here in the valley. And he couldn't use regular normal channels, so he used the Antiquities Act to get around the current law to come in and make a massive grant of hundreds of thousands of acres here.
Right. When you see things like that, you realize how wise our nation's founders were, that they delegated to the national government those things that could only be done at the national level: foreign affairs, interstate and international commerce, patents, and the regulation of our money supply. But they left to the states or the local governments those things that are addressed better at the local level. The people in Tulare County obviously have a lot better sense and understanding of how to balance jobs and environmental protection in their county than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. And the sooner we realize that original design was one that guaranteed the best access to liberty that we can imagine, the better we're going to get back on the right track to allowing citizens to engage in the kind of freedom-loving activities that our people have grown accustomed to.
Well, yeah, and this all boils back down to states' rights and local rights. And, the old saying used to be, if you didn't like it in this state, you could vote with your feet and move. But right now, I mean, if the government's reaching into every state, it makes it difficult. People start feeling like they're trapped. They're going, where do we go next where we have some freedom and liberty?
Well, that's right. And the notion that the states could serve as laboratories, the healthcare fight is a perfect example. We're learning now that the precursor of the healthcare bill, the Massachusetts healthcare bill, is not working very well. And the fact that Massachusetts tried it and it failed means that we could limit that failure to a single state, and the other states can then take different steps and correct it. But when you impose that nationally, You don't have an exit option when there's a failure. What are we going to do? Go to Tahiti to try and get our health care if we destroy the national health care system because of this bill? That's why something like health care provision was something always left to the states and for the people to decide. And if they want a greater health care, a more socialized health care system, they can move to a state that offers it. If they'd prefer to have the free market-based interaction with their own doctors that they choose, then they could go to a state that allows for that. But when you have a one-size-fits-all plan coming out of Washington, D.C., we're going to be severely limited in our freedoms and our options.
Okay, Dr. Eastman, stay right where you are. Don't touch any buttons. And we're going to take a short commercial break, and we're going to be right back. Stand by,
Thanks,
folks.
Jim.
Okay, yeah.